Meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, March 27, 2018. It's 6 o'clock p.m. and we are here in the Lead Street Administration Building. Oh, and we have a bit of an echo.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right, so I'd like to do a roll call, and then we'll go from there. Mr. Moser.
Here.
Hi, Mr. Kaufman.
Here.
Mrs. Raymond, I'm here. We also have Mr. Guarino, Mrs. Hohensee, Mrs. Oden for a little bit, Dr. Mosley, Mrs. Fitzpatrick. We have a couple of guests today, Lisa Gingras, our athletic director, Jerry Holland, our head athletic trainer, and Matt Gilman, our north athletic trainer.
Mr. Moser is here by telephone,
Yes.
and he is recuperating at home. And there is no one. Is there anyone in the room with you, Mr. Moser?
Well, I'm here all by my lonesome.
Thank you, sir.
And it should be noted that we have a large number of students and coaches, and I think parents in the back half of the room who are interested in some of the things that we have on our agenda today. So the first thing I'd like to propose is to suspend the rules and take our agenda items out of order. So I'd like to make a motion that we hear the football policy or the football discussion first, out of respect for the number of guests we have here who I believe are here to hear about football. Yes?
So moved.
Okay. And do we need to call roll? Yeah. Mr. Moser?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So let's begin with that. All right. So, Mr. Kaufman, it says on my agenda that there's a proposed football policy, but I didn't get a policy. I just got a bunch of articles about football. So I'm looking to you to find out what it is that you wish to discuss.
There is no proposal for a football policy. What I did was gather some information, largely from the internet, but I think from authoritative sources. And my intent was to have a discussion about football, mostly football safety, what it means to the district, what it has meant to the district going forward as well as currently, and to have a discussion about it. If I were to write a proposal around football, which has not been made, right, I would look toward something that would follow what the NFL is proposing and what they've done with athletics, high school sports, which is largely to reduce or eliminate the contact aspect of football and go with more of a touch or flag type football. And their argument there is that it actually, obviously the safety piece is the safety piece. But more than that, they have gotten good results because you guys are working on skills. Not the tackling, but the plays, the throwing, the coverage, all that conditioning, none of that changes. So that's all I really, all right, let me just say this. Hold on 1 second. So if I were to walk you through a discussion on this, here in Nashua, sadly we experienced a first time, it was the first practice of the year, if I recall correctly, a student was injured severely, hurt his neck. I believe he's going to be disabled for the rest of his life. There was also a lawsuit against the city where there was a substantial settlement that didn't come out of the school budget, but it does come out of the city finances. So, hold on a second. So I'm just pointing out what you asked me to discuss. So
just to clarify, that injury was the boy who was injured back in 2010, correct?
yes,
Okay, so there's nothing
more recent.
more recent than that.
No,
Okay,
one is more than enough.
I agree completely. I just wanted to,
Okay.
for my own knowledge, make sure that I'm following
So
appropriately.
my purpose is, on my watch as a board member, I don't want any student to face that. We shouldn't be in a situation where we're doing anything to encourage that. And I know you have the protocols in place, and I know you have all that stuff in place. And I know you're very thorough. I trust Ms. Gingras have great faith in her leadership on the athletic side there. She never disappoints when we ask for information. She's always on top of it. But I would like to, like I said, have the school consider moving toward the recommendation of the National Football League as it projects toward youth sports, which is something like a transition to flag football or tag football, whatever is appropriate. So that's, I mean, that's my summary. But there is no proposal, just be clear. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Moser, did you want to say anything? Or did you have any questions? We have some athletic directors and trainers here. Do you have anything that you wanted to discuss or questions about the articles that we received in our packet?
I don't have any particular things to discuss with the athletic director, but I believe that in all of our contact sports, that all necessary issues are being taken care of as far as injuries are concerned. And I have to say that I am pleased with what we've done so far since the other major injury that had taken place a couple of years ago. So keep up the good work.
Mr. Garvino.
Yeah, I would, if this proposal ever came to the full board, I would not vote for it. I think football is a rough sport, yes, and there are tragedies that happen all the time, but they're really outliers. And I am familiar. I know we have a concussion protocol, and I know that it's a lot different than it was before. And you know, students have been injured, paralyzed in hockey, in other sports, concussions in a lot of other sports too. So, you know, I understand the concern because one child, a tragedy, is one too many. But I think it's just a drastic, draconian change. I mean, in the way we do football, and I don't really see it as a trend around the country, and I don't see why Nashua has to change. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I just wanted to say that if it does come to the full board, I would not vote for it.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno.
Yes.
So I have a couple of things that I just wanted to clarify for my own knowledge before we decide if or what we might do about this. And so the first question I had is full disclosure here, I am not an athlete. I have never been an athlete. I don't know anything about sports. Great, good for all of you people, but it's not my area of expertise here. So one of the things I wanted to know about this is in some of these articles that were written by some pretty prominent medical professionals. So one of the things that they had mentioned was that schools should have a licensed athletic trainer on site and develop an emergency action plan as part of their football program. So I wanted to know a little bit about what we have already and if there are any gaps that we should be aware of and working towards meeting. And the second question I had was, are these kinds of injuries, like the kind where that poor student broke his neck, and other, like our concussion protocols, are those more football specific injuries, or are there other sports like hockey, or like I'm thinking girls field hockey and ice hockey and maybe even soccer, where these occur, and should we also be kind of looking into our practices about that?
So I'll start, if that's okay.
Thank you.
And then I'll turn it over to our athletic staff. So the National School District contracts with Performance Rehab. Jerry Holland is our head athletic trainer. And through that contract, we have an athletic trainer at each North and South. So Matt is our trainer over at North currently, and has been there for 3 years. So as part of that, they oversee and work with all of our student athletes. In the fall, the athletic trainer is always with the football team. If they're practicing, if there's a freshman game, a JV game, or a varsity game, the athletic trainer is with them. Our athletic trainer also will travel with them to away games.
Okay.
So Matt and Allie and Jerry, Allie's our trainer at South, Matt and Allie and Jerry deal with these students all the time, that it makes the most sense that when they are even, Spalding or Keene at an away game, if one of them gets injured, our trainers are familiar with their body and how it feels and, things like that and what other injuries they've had. So that's one thing. So that probably is raising the question, well, if they're gone, who's with the rest of our teams? Through Jerry's office, through part of the contract, if our trainers aren't available to us, we do hire per diem trainers. And we have several per diem trainers that we see regularly. So they also know a lot of our students. If you mention some of their names to our students, they'd be like, oh yeah, we see them all the time. So that happens. And I think that answered the first part of your question.
Yeah.
Emergency action plans. We have emergency action plans at the school. Our trainers have a whole other set of emergency action plans. And one of the things that I've implemented with all of my coaches is once they have their teams, the coaches have conversations with their individual teams and what is an emergency action plan for that team. Who's going to go meet the ambulance? Who's going to go find the AED? Who's going to go find the trainer if it happens, that they're on the varsity softball field, but the trainer's down at the JV softball field. So each individual team has that conversation in that emergency action plan as well.
And are those things that parents have to sign up on?
Parents, the emergency action plans, no. As part of our registration process, they are signing off that they understand their child could get hurt. They sign off that their child, we have permission to treat their child either by our trainers or by, if somebody gets hurt and we have to transfer it to the emergency room, we have that legal permission to seek treatment for them. I don't know if either of you want to add.
We, like Lisa was saying, so I've been with the district like 28 years. I'm a physical therapist and an athletic trainer, so I oversee both schools. I help coordinate the medical coverage for home football games where we have a doc at all the home games. And we also have a doc that one at each school that fairly regularly come to the school to do injury screenings as well. So we get a lot of eyes regarding that. As far as injuries, in the 28 years I've been here, we've had two significant neck injuries. Obviously, the young student athlete get injured in 2010. We also had a hockey player over 20 years ago who broke his neck playing hockey. 6 months later, he was playing hockey again. So it's not just unique to football. And that individual who got hurt at Nashua North, which was horrific, it wasn't the first day of practice. Things have changed, but we have three days, and then it was the first day of contact, unfortunately. And he obviously sustained a devastating neck injury. It's a little different than a concussion, although concussions can be catastrophic as well, but slightly different. When that happened, my athletic trainer who covered North at the time, it was an athlete. She did a tremendous job stabilizing, and they got him off to the hospital as quickly as possible. And again, the end result was very, very sad, but we instituted an impact testing concussion protocol. Been doing it for over 8 years now. We have athletic awareness nights 3 times a year at each school, where Lisa would be like she runs the show that evening, and during that time, it's a mandatory meeting for the student athletes, the coaches of that season, and the parent or guardian. And I get an opportunity to talk. I bring my staff, Matthew and Allie, with me, and I actually get to talk to everybody and explain to them what we do. We're like the medical coaches, for lack of a better word. You don't just focus on concussions. Obviously, that's a very, for lack of a better term, a flavor of the month injury, and it's super important, but it's very prominent right now. We do the very same test that they do in the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball, the NCAA. It's the same exam. We've had the same clinical neuropsychologist from day one. He's a great guy. The information, what we do is each athlete who plays a collision sport takes the baseline exam as a freshman and as a junior, and any other student athlete who might move into the area. We have baseline data, which our clinical neuropsychologist has access to. So then in the event that there is a diagnosed concussion, and I say the term diagnosed by a medical professional, whether it's someone on my staff, school nurse, their primary care doc, then we kick into the plan of the return to play protocol, which first step would be to take that exam again. And the numbers have to jive. Those numbers, all that information gets sent to our clinical neuropsychologist. If the numbers are accurate or where they should be in the healing process, then we progress to some active activities. First thing is just get on a stationary bike. If things go well, we progress between approximately a 7-day period where we go back to sport-specific activities. If it's a football player, they're doing football drills, soccer, and so on. Then they get cleared again by a medical person. Then they return to play. There's no shortcuts. It's not going to work that way. It never has, and all the time I've been here. And it's worked extremely well. I think that the general public knows what to expect when they get to see us and meet us, and they know they can contact us at any time.
So you said all athletes who are involved in impact sports.
We call it collision sports. So
which sports are those?
which are quite a few. So in the fall, obviously, it's football. We get soccer, boys and girls soccer. We have field hockey, volleyball, cheerleading, basically everything in the fall but golf. Am I correct? Cross country.
Okay.
And then in the winter, it's basketball, hockey, wrestling, cheerleading, ski team.
Again, in the winter,
That's
pretty
all
much,
winter.
it's easier to tell you what's not considered a collision. In the fall is cross country. In the winter is indoor track and swimming, unless they're divers.
Yeah. Okay.
And then in the spring, track again, unless they're pole vaulters, and tennis. Those are considered the non-contact sports.
So everybody else gets tested. So that works out fairly well.
One other thing I'd like to add, when Jerry was talking, he mentioned the medical coverage for home football games. In addition to that school's athletic trainer, often other teams travel with their athletic trainers as well. Often Jerry will show up. And as he said, we do have a doctor who volunteers their time and is on the sideline of our home football games. And we also have an ambulance on site. So we have all that additional medical coverage.
And then I have one other question about the NFL. I don't know if it's the new NFL idea about non-contact. Can you help me with the words here, Mr. Kaufman?
Well, they identify something called USA Football, sort of
yes,
as
I
a
see.
parent organization, and then there's program that they've implemented called Heads Up Football.
And do we know if there are any other school districts, either locally or even broader, who have done this Heads Up football?
I honestly don't know.
Heads up football is a way
Yeah.
to that involves tackling and whatnot, and the correct terminology and the correct implementation of that.
Okay.
That's a coaching thing.
Okay.
So that's involved tackle. It has changed dramatically. We have the two head football coaches for each school here tonight. They do a phenomenal job as far as what is done on the field, how often it's done. The game has changed dramatically since I played high school football a long time ago, and the coaches have. Obviously, safety is key. We try to minimize as much as we can with the equipment, the strength and conditioning aspect, the coaching aspect, the decrease in the amount of actually contact during a practice. It's nothing like it used to be, and it's going to change again in the fall. Usually football would start 4 days ahead of time of the other sports. That's not going to be the case anymore. It won't. It's going to. So we minimize the contact and try to maximize the skill aspect of it. But talking a lot about the strength conditioning aspect, because if a student athlete is stronger and more physical he or she is, it'll help minimize if an accident does occur. We use the term build a body of armor. It doesn't matter if you're a football player or a female golfer. It doesn't matter. You'll be a better athlete, better student athlete, when you hyphenate, with a good strength, and we coordinate all that. I've been here 28 years. Coach Knight and I started the first year together. So we coordinate, and Coach Laurenti at North the same way, as far as if an injury occurs, since we're talking about football, we coordinate that. It's not my way or the highway. He's not going to tell me he better be on the field. It doesn't work that way. We don't tell Coach Knight, Coach Laurenti, what plays to run. They're great about, we discuss injuries. How can we implement something different in the strength conditioning aspect? Maybe remove this exercise, add this one. It's a teamwork approach throughout by far.
I'd like to just emphasize what Jerry said, that heads-up football isn't a different type of way of playing football, it's a different way of teaching it.
Okay.
Proper technique on proper tackling, and I'm getting nods from my coaches back here. It's proper techniques on how to tackle, so when you tackle and you have contact, you're safe doing it.
Okay. That is very helpful for clarification.
Yeah.
And so from that, does that sound like that's something that we are already practicing, or that there's a plan to do it? All right.
We're absolutely.
The
in
kids are all
process of
nodding.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm
We,
seeing
uh,
a lot of
the kids are nodding.
nods.
There's a lot of
Okay.
student athletes here today. A lot of them are multi-sport athletes, and quite a few of them are honor roll students. Quite a few of them are Athletic Leadership Council. Quite a few of them have won the Scholar Athlete Awards. So we got a tremendous amount of smarts here tonight.
And I think it's important to note that they were nodding because they know that phrase. They know what it means, they know that cue, that when you tackle, your head is up. And that's an important thing, that it's not just our coaches and our staffs that are trained in it, but the kids understand why it's so important.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm
Mr.
greatly
Holland.
impressed with the safety measures and everything you've described. I'm not here to kill football, okay? I couldn't kill it if I wanted to. I'd be stupid to try and kill football, okay? I'm not that stupid. So I'm just, be real clear, I'm not here to end football, period. Okay, so relax, take a breath, it's not gonna happen, okay? Not from me. How's that? Okay, having said that, I lost my train of thought for a second, but I was just looking at something here. Give me 1 second, Bruce. I guess. I'm sorry. I'll remember what it is in a second.
You want to come back to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr.
I just
Moser?
have a general question about policies around football. Is there a governing body around sports? And I'm looking here at the New Hampshire Scholastic Association, is that correct?
NHIAA.
And do they have policies around football and procedures? Is that correct? Because I'm looking at the website here,
They
and
have,
they have an extensive amount. So I guess this is a opportunity where they govern all of our programs, not just here in Nashua, but for the entire state.
yes.
So, to kind of explain that a little bit, how we're governed by that in terms
Sure.
of policies and.
We are, both North and South are member schools of the NHIAA, which means we agree to abide by all of their bylaws. And on their website is the full handbook with all of their bylaws. As part of those bylaws, one of the things Jerry's mentioned a few times is how practices to football are going to change this fall, because that's one of the bylaws that is changing. Many of us grew up, fall sports, you had 2 days, double sessions. Everybody in this room, I think, has been through double sessions at some point. And it was, constant contact, repetition, things like that. And they backed off on that for several years. Football used to start, as Jerry said, 4 days before everybody else. But the first 3 days, there was absolutely no contact, so that our coaches could teach the proper contact mechanics and techniques. Now, next year, we're going that not only are they starting with everybody else, but there is a very prescribed, I'm looking right here, the first day they can only have helmets and there's absolutely no contact. Then there's limited contact with dummies. Then there's limited contact in drills. And it's gonna be 5, 6, 7 days before they even put full pads on and have body-to-body contact. So the NHIAA has even taken steps to continue to move the safety forward. Above the NHIAA is the NFHS, which is the National Federation of High School Sports, which New Hampshire is I think it's called 100% state, which means we don't pick and choose which of their bylaws we follow. We follow everything. The NFHS has an entire guideline on concussions and very much the return to play protocol that Jerry described. So, we're following all the rules. The NHIAA has a sports medicine committee, which Jerry is a member of. Different facets, different stakeholders in the state relative to sports, and doing everything that they can do to make sports safe in all respects, not just football, things like that. Did that answer your question thoroughly
Thank
enough?
you.
Mr. Kaufman, it came to you?
Yes, yeah, it didn't really take too long, but it did lose the current storage in my brain for a second. So I'm curious about the aspects, the liability to the district. That's something we always worry about as board members. I know you guys might not, but we do. And along with that, the level of detail of parental consent. Perhaps you could speak to what kinds of just the nature of the parental consent involved and the liability or lack thereof, or what's taken on by whom.
So
And one as a piece to that would be what insurance might be in surrounding it, since I really don't.
So I can address a couple of pieces of that. I think the liability piece, that would be more of a question for legal counsel and the city's risk management. I know quite a bit about it, having gone through the recent lawsuit, but I am by no means an expert in the district's insurance and all of the pieces associated with risk management. But I do know that it exists in the city. No, I'll leave it at that. In terms of the consent, we went to an online registration process 5 years ago. My first year as athletic director was our first year using it. The previous athletic director had worked with the city council at the time to make sure that all of the proper consent forms that we used to do in paper got translated to the online registration form. So there is consent in there. The parents have to do it every season that their kids compete, that they, again, sign up and agree, I'm giving permission for the district to take my child on a bus out of town to compete athletically. I understand the risks and the injury that could take place. I know it used to say risks including and up to, including death. I'm not sure if that's still in there or not. But the consent form is pretty lengthy, that they agree to a lot. Does it remove all liability of the district? Probably not. But that we have the parents' permission to have them play and have them treated if there is an injury. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Oh, did you have one more?
At some point, if there are parents here, I'd like to maybe
Okay, yeah.
engage them.
I'm a parent of an student athlete here as well.
Okay.
I'm a parent,
I'm
former
more than
parent.
happy. There's a lot of other ones here too.
My son was in the,
Thank you
I
for
wear
coming.
two hats.
So, Mr. Gorbino, and then I was gonna.
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to say that, risk is a decision that students and families make. It should belong to them. It's a private decision. And we shouldn't take that away from the parents. Real football, tackle football, has been part of our culture for over 100 years. And to change it drastically, it doesn't make any sense. And I know we have a really good Pop Warner program in Nashua. We get a lot of kids that come up through that system, and they're they know how to play football, and they know how to avoid injury. So, like I said before, I just want to make those points clear. And also, my son has graduated now, and he didn't go all 4 years in football, but he was in football. And I've been through the system where you have to sign consent. I've been through all of the acquaintances. I've got the emails and everything. So I think that belongs. We shouldn't be taking that away from the parents. We shouldn't be taking away real football. And I was actually also aware of Heads Up. I didn't know the name of it, but I know they don't use their head to spear and their head to tackle. I knew that change happened throughout schoolboy football in New England. I know, probably throughout the country. So, anyways, I guess I've talked enough, but I won't be in favor of making any changes to our system.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino.
Yep.
So I think I've counted 24, maybe I've missed a couple heads in the back, student athletes here, and I just would like to state for everybody watching how impressed I am at their commitment to come out at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night to be here in support of their sport, but also to help educate us so that we know what we're talking about. It's a lot easier for us to make decisions when we have information on which to base them on. Typically, we don't do public comments during our committee meetings. However, I've spoken with Mr. Kaufman. I haven't asked Mr. Moser yet, but I think the two of us at least are willing to open it up. If there are parents or coaches or students who have something brief that they'd like to share with us, since you came all the way out here, I am certainly excited to hear what you have to say, if anyone does want to speak. So, Mr. Moser, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to.
Just want to ask one thing, and
Okay.
it's not an obstacle, it's just a formal thing. Do we need to have a motion to suspend the rules to allow public comment? You
Sure,
suspended
let's
to
do it.
move things, but
Let's
okay.
do it by the book. So I would like to make a motion that we
You should-
suspend the
you
rules.
should let,
Oh, you make them.
yes, it's
Fine.
only because you did. Motion to suspend the rules to allow public comment.
Great. I'll second it. Mr. Moser.
Yes. What?
Okay. Mr. Kaufman.
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Did any of you sign up a sheet?
No, but
No, we don't.
Okay,
We didn't
so-
do that because we didn't know we were gonna have.
Can I make a
I think we
suggestion,
have to
just to
rewrite
make
it.
a little bit of fun here? Pick a hot seat, whoever's in that seat
Write
gets
your
to
name down.
speak.
Oh wait, do you need a pen?
Just for fun, guys,
Is it
lighten
just
up.
the three of
Sure.
you? Anybody else wants to? I think it's just these three.
Okay, so if you could,
Oh, I think Derek would also.
Oh, sorry,
okay,
Derek.
so if you could write your name,
Just wanna write your names down.
I'd appreciate your name and your school.
Perfect. Yep.
Okay.
You should announce their
Sean.
name when you speak.
That's what I was
So
just
get the
saying.
list first.
Well, I was just gonna have them read it, like write them and then tell me out loud who they are.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah, that should be fun.
Okay.
Sean, did you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Sean Holland. I am a senior at Nashua High School South. I am a three-sport athlete for 4 years, so I'm in my 12th season right now. And I would just like to state that I've always felt safe in the hands of our athletic training staff. And for any questions or injuries that I've had, they've been very helpful and open to discussing any questions that I had. I have been injured in the past, and I have gone through it hasn't been a concussion or head injury, but I have gone through a process to get me back to where I felt comfortable to get back on the field of play. And that's all I have to say. I feel very safe and comfortable with our athletic staff in high school.
Thank you, Mr. Holland.
All right, I'll go next. My name is Tanner Floyd. I'm a junior at Nashua South. I play football and baseball there. I like to piggyback on Sean. I've always felt very safe. We have very strict protocols we have to go through for things like concussions and other injuries, and it's never been a question of safety for me. I reached out to Kendall Race. He's an NFL player. He went to National North, and I told him about this subject, and I'd like to read what he sent back to me. He said, "Hello, my name is Kendall Race, and I was born and raised in Nashua. Growing up in Nashua, I was heavily influenced by sports because it taught me many life lessons and molded me into the man I am today. The thing I love about football is it was the game everyone could play. Not everyone could dribble or hit a ball into the outfield, but it was football that gave my friends a chance to compete and enjoy playing together. It's a sport that allows for many different skill sets and body types to all play together, but I can say the best part of the game is the camaraderie. It's the moments on the field and in the locker room that allowed us to be kids and momentarily escape any trouble we may have been facing or dealing with. To address safety, because I know that may be a concern, football, like many other sports, has its inherent risks. But many things done in this country do as well, and that doesn't mean it should be banned or changed. Instead of focusing on remediation, I think the focus should be on education, teaching these kids how to play an incredible sport at a high level. As I mentioned before, football gave me an opportunity to many kids that the other sports didn't. I just happen to be an example of the many where I can say without a doubt in my mind, football changed my life. Thank you." And I think what he's trying to get at is, like, we don't need to change the whole basis of football. Little things can be changed to increase safety, but taking away the whole part of football, it might cause less injuries, but it's really going to change a lot of people's lives in a negative effect.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd.
Okay. I'm Mike Levis. I'm a junior at Nashua North, and I have been through the concussion protocol, and I did have a concussion, and I did see Matt right away, and I felt safe the entire process. During the game, he protected me from myself as a football player. I want to go back out there. I want to go, help the team. But in the end, he protected me, and he knew that something was wrong. I went through the concussion protocol for the week. I was fine, but at no point did I feel unsafe or that my safety was not the number one priority for him and his staff.
Thank you. Mr. Levis?
Loveless.
Loveless. Thank you very much.
My name is Kyle Reeder. I go to Nashua High School South. I've been playing football for South for 4 years. I'm also a senior. And for 3 of those years, I was in the varsity program on the O-line. I was always feeling safe, I never really felt like I was ever in any danger. I always felt fine. Even if it felt like, the trainers would always tell us, if you ever feel like something's wrong, just go talk to them. It's better to find out, you may have a little tweak before it gets bad. It's something they always tell us. And another thing is the coaches always tell us how to be safe too. As a part of the O-line, our O-line coach, Coach Manley, he had us use this thing called the sled. And the sled is a very heavy instrument that 7 guys at a time have to push across the field. And one thing he always makes sure is that our heads are up. Our face mask is on the pad, the top of our heads aren't on it, and that's just to get us to physically understand our mask will always be up to reduce that chance of injury. Those are the type of things that they do, that they've always, maybe not always have done, but they've done with us this time.
Thank you, Mr. Reeder.
My name is Jalen Pacheco. I play football for Nashua High School South, and I just want to start off by saying that football is a dangerous sport. You can get hurt, but we sign up and we know we know what could possibly happen. And it's me, I love playing football. I love the aggression, and I've gone through my fair share of injuries. This year, I hurt my shoulder. I had a concussion, but I was always taken care of. I never had to worry about anything serious coming for it, because Jerry always made sure I was okay. He always told me to check in with Allie if anything hurt, and they make sure that you're okay, so you don't have to worry about not being taken care of and being scared to go out there and play. Because at the end, anything can happen, but it's not all about getting hurt in football. Football brings people together. We have kids coming from different states and stuff. If he doesn't mind, my friend here, Henry, he came from Kentucky, and we all took him in he didn't come from anywhere else. He grew up playing with us, and it's more than just being scared to get hurt and stuff. It brings us all together and makes us a family.
Thank you. Mr. Checo?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
I'm Tony York. I'm also a senior at Nashua South, and I feel we keep going back to the concept of the safety of football. Well, at least in South, I can speak on South's behalf. What I felt since I was a freshman is that they care more about your safety and well-being than you being a football player. I remember coming in freshman year learning about that, the heads-up thing where you keep your chest up, head up, and it's I'm oh, this is stupid. And it's well, we don't care if you think it's stupid. We're trying to keep you safe. And it's right there, that they're out watching you, so you can go have fun and be safe doing it, And I know what's his name, Mr. Kaufman's trying to say with the whole safety thing, the risk and all that, but it's once you step outside of your door, you don't know what's gonna happen. It's the same thing when you pad up, you don't know what's gonna happen. It could be your last game. Just when you walk outside, it could be your last day. You know what I mean? So to take that away means you have to take a lot of things away, keep people safe, and I think we're doing a great job ourselves of doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Ayer. Tyler?
My name is Tyler Bernard. I'm a senior at Nashua South, and I'm going to stray a little from the safety part, but I know people playing D3 football college, I know people playing D1, and I think when you talked about the touch football or the flag football, in college, that's not going to happen. So we have a lot of people in here who are going to be playing college football, and that's not a reality when you're moving up. And I started football my junior year, and I was always Max Osgood was up against me, running. Huge kid played D1 football, or is, and I never felt threatened because we have great coaches who taught us to keep our heads up, never cross our head across their body. Everything was installed into us to make sure that we were safe and to make sure that everyone was safe. I never felt threatened, and it was my first year playing against a D1 player. So that's what I have to say.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bernard.
I'm Derek Travelli. I'm also from Nashua South. I've been in the football program for 4 years, and I know we keep reiterating the safety thing, but obviously safety is the most important part. So every year I've just seen an improvement in everything we do, whether it be our technique. The tackling has changed from even just my freshman year, and I've only been in the program for 4 years. Freshman year to senior year, the tackling has just greatly improved to reduce risk of injury. The helmets, the shoulder pads, everything is improved. Obviously, the trainers do a fantastic job. If I even come off the field and I'm limping slightly, it's like you got 2 trainers like, you okay? Let's take a look at it. The physical therapy office is right across the street from South, so you get treated immediately at your convenience. They do whatever they can to help you. The coaches do a great job of making sure that we're doing everything right, because injury, it's not about winning games in the end. It's about keeping the players safe, making sure we're all having fun, making sure we're together as a family, and for the whole season. So that's how I felt in my 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Travelli.
Travelli, yes.
Travelli, great. Thank you. I really appreciate all of you for coming in and speaking and sharing your knowledge with us. Did anyone else have a comment on this topic? Mrs. Holland.
I just wanted to thank them all for coming in, because after reading about the accident and not being familiar with tackle football, only touch, I was concerned. And I hear that you've got protocols that seem to have come in, that things have improved. So it's helped reassure me to know that this isn't as big a risk as it appears when you read about it and you're not familiar with the sport. I'm familiar with sports, but just not this one. My kid's fenced, and that's a lot of aggression. We didn't have an ambulance waiting at the end of the strip. So it was very reassuring to hear that all these protocols were in place. So I thank you for coming.
Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. Yeah, I think the word is reassurance. That's kind of what I was looking for. Okay, just as Ms. Hohensie said. So, like I said before, I'm not going to be making a change to football. Okay, I don't foresee any motions coming out of this, and all I would envision is that we had a productive, informative discussion. But think about this for a second. What did you just do for your football program in Nashua? Do you realize what we've done here? You have just made everybody clear that you support it. There's no questions. You brought in your trainers, your athletic director, the coaches are here showing support, so the community knows you support it. You've demonstrated your commitment to the program, and that you've given me some very concrete examples of why this thing needs to be in place. So I'm going to give you an example of what happened last year when we were doing the budget cycle. There was a proposal to do away with the Clearway Alternative High School. And part of the problem that we had as a board was that we were paying for seats in the program that went unfulfilled. Not long ago, I spoke with the director over at Clearway. They're at capacity in September. Usually the first 2 months are, there's spaces. This year, everything was full. They have a waiting list. Okay, I suggest that the viability of this program is superior. Parents now know if their children want to engage, that they have the absolute best resources available. And I really appreciated when you said family. I get that piece of it. So thanks for coming in. I'm thrilled to hear that we have a thriving program. Thanks for taking away the concerns of an ignorant person, right? Who doesn't know a lot about football. I'm too small to get on the field with you guys. I don't care what the other guys say. And when I was a kid, I was kind of fast, but they'd throw me the ball in basketball, but I didn't complete the shot. And you all know what happens. Do I ever get that ball again? No. So sports were not part of my life, sadly. Scouting is how I ended up working with kids. So that's all. Thanks so much for coming in and setting the record straight. That's how I look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Out of curiosity, are any of you intending or interested in staying for the other items on our agenda tonight? Because if not, what I'd like to do is to actually give us like a tiny recess, maybe 3 minutes, so that y'all can leave, and then we can kind of go back and hit the rest of our items. It will be very interesting. We're talking about committees and delegates and meeting minutes. No? Okay. So let's go ahead and take a recess. It is 8:45. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, you understand where you're going? All right.
Okay.
Good luck, guys. Good luck. Thanks for coming in. You're welcome.
So we saved it, so I at least wanted to submit that. Do it as you.
Yes, I'm not sure what, but thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for informing us.
You welcome. This is going to help you more than you think.
With that twang, what part of New York?
The Bronx.
I could, my son, Sean, he's gonna go to Fordham next year.
Oh, it's down the street.
Right in the Bronx.
Yep.
See my
Nice
family
school.
relatives there.
Nice school.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. I met your son this
The end
weekend.
of
I was
Fordham
very
Road.
impressed.
It's the end of Fordham Road. What he needs to know is when you continue, when you come out really down the hill and
Right.
the Italian neighborhood is that direction.
Arthur Avenue.
Yes, so that's where the food is.
Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate
Nice to meet you,
it.
Mr.
No,
Murray.
you guys
Yeah.
have a lot of
Take care.
fun.
No, it's the other way.
Other way? Inland?
Inland.
Because you get down by
It's west.
Columbia and further, it's
No,
always
that you're
up.
talking Manhattan. We're still in the
Okay.
Bronx.
Okay, down Manhattan, it's towards the river.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
shaking
Oh,
your hand.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, sorry, I know that it's non-traditional to have a
No,
that's
recess
fine.
in the
Well,
minute.
no, it's fine.
but it
Makes a lot of
just
sense.
seemed like
No.
it would be quite large.
Perfect.
Yes. Okay.
So one other thing, well, I'll do it when we get back on the record, I guess. So one of the students wrote a letter.
Yeah, we could submit that to the record. But one thing she'll just have to
He
type.
didn't sign it.
Actually, she could probably scan it in as attachment.
So we'll just wait for Mrs.
You can go back to the beginning.
Patrick, and then we'll go back to the beginning, unless we have a objection to that.
No.
Mr. Moser, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
All right.
And it's very
Just need
interesting.
to make sure this recording device is
Still going?
working, yeah. Okay. Because I tried to pause it. I believe it's working now.
Oh, you paused it for the break.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like.
Yeah, it's still
Okay.
working. It's,
Okay,
we're good.
Okay. So I think this is it. So I'd like to go ahead and call us back. Are you ready, sir?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah,
Okay.
we're still going.
So let's bring us back into session at, I can't read that clock, at 6:48 p.m. So one thing that happened during the break is I was handed this letter by a junior at Nashua South, Mr. Tanner Ford. So I just would like to enter this into the record that he did write a letter so that we can all get a copy of it and read it at our leisure. I'm not really sure what to do with it. So I'll put it
Give
there.
it to me and Tara and it's.
Excellent, thank you, Mrs. Dickerson. And then there's the guests. So no one hung out to go over our policy BDE committees and delegates. So this is something that came before us. No.
Yes, it
Yes,
came
it came
before the
before us last month.
Yes, and the reason it got sent back to committee is because it lists the budget committee as a subcommittee, but it's actually a committee of the whole. And that's why it was
That's been
referred,
changed?
and that's why it was referred back to us, because it's under, it, when people were looking at it, they said that it was a committee of the whole, and this needed to be changed to accommodate that.
So where would that reference to the committee of the whole be made? So there's no proposed language for that?
No, because it was sent back here and it's the paragraph below number 5 says standing committees with the exception of budget committee shall consist of 3 voting members and a single alternate. I assume that somewhere in there would say budget committee is the exception because it's a committee of the whole. Because it is
It does at the last
says
sentence
a
of that
budget-
paragraph.
It says the budget shall consist of all of the members of the Board of
okay.
Education.
I didn't send it back to committee.
We also had that one word changed
Yes,
too.
and that one word was changed, which was agreed upon at the full board.
The any.
Yes.
Okay.
So can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So is it necessary to pull out number 4 given that paragraph following the list the numbered list. In other words, that with the exception of the standing committees, with the exception of budget, I mean, that sentence,
Yes, because it says the budget committee shall advise the board on the development, evaluation, and adoption of the annual
Yeah.
budget but the budget committee is a committee of the whole, but don't you have representatives for the budget committee, or everyone attends?
everybody is,
And everyone's a voting member?
yes.
Okay.
But we need that, and we need it to identify it as one of our 5 standing committees. We can't take it out, because then we won't have a budget committee as a standing committee. Because it's like a list of standing committees.
Why don't we just make an exception? Committee meetings with the exclusion of budget shall run no longer than 90 minutes in length.
Well, no, you want the,
No, you don't.
you want it to, you want the, well, actually, well, the budget, 90 minutes is an hour and a half.
Mr. Moser,
Yes,
do you have an opinion on this? We're asking about in red, committee meetings shall run no longer than 90 minutes in length. Should,
yes, that is a good idea, that the
Yep.
committee, the standing committee would be 90 minutes in length, with the exception of the budget committee, which be longer, but to what extent would it be longer? That is something that I think we should do, because I remember sitting in budget committee meetings, over the past years, where we had left around midnight. That is totally unacceptable.
So maybe you should make it 2 hours.
Kind of a limit on the budget process. To make it, let's say that 3 hours.
so, Mr. Moser, just so I'm hearing you, you propose 3 hours.
3 hours?
Mrs.
The maximum for the budget committee would be 3 hours.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
At the full board meeting, when this specific policy was referred back to subcommittee, it wasn't about the proposed change, it was about the fact that budget committee is defined differently than the rest of the standing committees. That's why it got referred back. I'm just, you know, it's
Yeah,
up
I
to the
remember,
board,
yeah.
it's up to the board what you do. I just want to be clear about why it was referred back.
Thank you, that's helpful. Mr. Kaufman.
Yeah, but once the policy's in front of us, we have every right to modify or change it. So I would like to suggest a change. If you want a motion to do it, let me just tell you what it is and then we can formalize it. Regarding the entry 4, regarding the budget committee.
Okay.
Okay, the budget committee, comma, as a committee of the whole, shall advise the board on development, evaluation, adoption of its annual budget. So that way, we've identified it, not, there's more clarity around its exception. Because below it just says standing committees with the exception of budget are 3 members. And now, if we identify the budget committee as a committee of the whole.
Will we say that at the last line of that paragraph? The budget
Oh, I'm
committee shall
sorry.
consist of all the members of the Board of Education.
Oh, okay, I missed that sentence. Okay.
So, I think it's redundant.
Okay, all right, fine.
It is, it's clear, but it's redundant. My concern is if we send a budget over to the alderman, maybe not this year, but if there's a different conflicting, alderman, they may send it back and then we have a short period of time to amend it and return it or something like that. I don't want to put any constraints on this if we do get to emergency situations that we may need to have long meetings.
Mr. Collins.
But if you have a 3-hour meeting, that's pretty long, and then you can vote to continue that meeting every 30 minutes. So you're giving yourself a lot of time. But you have to, you also can't, the sky's not the limit. People are human. They need sleep.
Mr. Hoffman.
Nobody wants to stay late. Let's get that real clear. I've never met a board member that wanted to stay late. We always have tried to finish as early as possible. In just speaking as the budget chair for this year, we missed a meeting We've had one meeting where we've actually done our, I call it horse trading. We have 2 meetings scheduled remaining. We have 2 this week and the next week. Personally, we'll see how it goes. But just sometimes you have to, there's a certain kind of a momentum to a meeting, and I think you've experienced this. And if you're working and you're productive and you're making progress and people are willing to continue, if someone asks for a break or asks for an adjournment, then you stop. And it's the dynamic of the group to do this stuff of imposing artificial limits on meetings. You saw what happened last night. That was an absolute mess. And we never even finished the intent of that agenda. So by imposing this in the committees, and especially on the budget committee, I would argue to remove the red text completely. And I so move to do that. I move to strike the 2 last paragraphs on the first page. Committee meetings shall run, that paragraph, and the one following proposed any additional 30-minute extension. So I move to strike those.
Mr. Moser, do you feel inclined to second Mr. Kaufman's motion to strike all of the red language?
Absolutely not.
Right.
We need that in there, and it is a very important thing because after we go a certain amount of time, we are not capable of clear thinking sometimes, and we have that break. I disagree with Mr. Kaufman on that very strongly.
I also disagree with that, and I can't second it at this time. I will say this. I think that we ought to put a limit in. I'm comfortable with 3 hours, which is longer than the others. I think it brings it in line, in spirit with our other policies regarding this. And I also will say that some of the issues that we have are not necessarily about the length of the meeting. It's about our ability to use our time wisely and productively, and to limit discussions to staying on topic. And that's really all I have to say about that at this time. So, Mr. Moser, do you have a motion to make?
Yes, I move to accept the policy and its completeness, BDE, and pass it on to the full board.
Without an exception for the budget committee, or with an exception for the budget committee?
Okay, that's right. My mind was slipping there for a minute. The budget committee shall consist of all, and the budget committee shall run no longer than 3 hours, unless by a vote of 2/3 of the board to extend it for additional 30 minutes.
I'll second that.
Could we make this clear? Because I think his assumption is that we're going to use the same mechanism, the majority vote to continue, the supermajority to add increments of 30 minutes, not just a one-time. So if you're going to use that language, we should dovetail it better.
Yes. So I would say, right in the red, the first line is committee meetings shall run no longer than 90 minutes in length. Earlier we discussed adding at that point, with the exception of the budget committee, and then period, the budget committee shall run no longer than 3 hours. And then period, 5 minutes prior to the conclusion of the meeting. Committee members, I would get rid of the 85 minutes. Committee members may make the determination to lengthen the meeting time by 30-minute increments. Because if we include that 85, it no longer makes sense, but without it, it runs smoothly.
Very good.
85 minutes is 5 minutes before your 90 minutes. That's the same as the other policy.
I understand, but by eliminating that, we can do both in one line.
Oh, yes.
Does that make sense?
Okay,
And
because there's 2 different end times.
yes, and we will assume that committee members are able to subtract by 5.
And can you just say it again for me? Committee meetings shall run no longer than
90 minutes in length, with the exception of the budget committee, period. The budget committee shall run no longer than 3 hours in length, period. And then 5 minutes prior to the conclusion of the meeting, and then strike out 85 minutes. Committee members may make the determination to lengthen the meeting time by 30-minute increments with a majority vote to conclude a specific topic being discussed.
And then my only other question is, because everything else is in minutes, should we make the 3 hours minutes? For consistency, it's up to you. Okay.
Does anyone feel strongly about that?
I think we think in
Do you think
minutes,
that's
not-
really necessary to
I think we
extend?
think in hours, not minutes.
Okay. Okay, so that's the motion.
So are you willing to entertain any other exceptions for, say, presentations or non-public sessions or whatever? They happen. They
Not-
happen in committees like this. For example, the HR committee, we oftentimes will have a non-public session. And you're going to run into a 90-minute limit at an HR meeting.
And
At some
then,
point in time, you will.
and then a 30-minute, and then we can vote to extend by 30 minutes as many times as necessary.
Well, actually,
You've already
No, you
built in.
can't.
You've already got it built in. If you want to extend the meeting, if you have presentations, you don't need any other extra. You got a 3-hour meeting, which is very long, and then you've got 30 minutes on top of that every time you want to extend it.
No, Mr.
Actually-
Kaufman was referring
and
to
I was speaking.
the other
and you
ones.
interrupted
To the
me.
what? I'm sorry, what?
Mr. Kaufman was speaking to the other committees. Mr. Kaufman.
The other-
Thank you. So the point is that I'm just trying to make you aware that we do have, I'm just saying, you're putting an exception in for budget, which seems to make sense. I disagree with the specific limit, but the point is, you're going to bump up against these things, and you're going to face, by not accounting for and providing exceptions to things like presentations, especially when you've shortened the meeting to 90 minutes. Dr. Mosley's presentation last night took a half an hour. So that would really cut 1/3 of one of these meetings. And you can't guarantee, the point is to what you said, Mrs. Raymond, the way this is structured, you can only continue with the subject that was discussed. You cannot add things to, even if they're on the agenda, it prevents discussion. And that's what's going to get you in more trouble. And I strongly encourage this committee to, if you want to cut the meeting times, don't restrict the agenda items to be discussed. Because that's why you got into so much trouble last night, was that you ran out the clock and the meeting had to end because people didn't want to continue, so that legitimate items on the agenda were not met, including a non-public session.
With respect, Mr. Kaufman, we did not run out the clock. A certain individual read a very long statement that was not related to the superintendent's comments during the superintendent comment response period. That took up quite a bit of time. I will not entertain further discussion this evening about last night's meeting. That is a
Fine.
separate policy that is not on the table today.
But the language is essentially replicated here, with the only difference that 90 minutes are specified here and the other one was 2 hours.
I respect,
So
I agree with that.
the conversation is the same. I'm sorry. But I'll
I'd
stop,
like to say
that's fine.
Yeah, this gives you an incentive for people to be brief. We need to have an incentive for people, to keep it brief, because we know we have limitations.
Stop being obstructive.
I'm sorry.
Is it Mr. Moser?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I said to move along and stop trying to obstruct the process by adding and nitpicking.
Mrs. Helen, please.
Nobody's trying to obstruct the process. I spoke for 10 minutes
I'm not
yesterday.
discussing last night's meeting at this meeting. It is
You-
not
and you
relevant.
referred to
She's
it.
talking.
It
She's
is-
talking.
It is
She's
not
speaking.
Shout, man.
relevant
She's
to
You're going
this.
down the wrong hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr.
We're honest.
Guarino,
Yeah.
Mr. Guarino, you are out of order. It is not relevant to this policy, and I will not entertain further discussion of it tonight.
You're censoring
I
me.
will not entertain further discussion of things that are not on the topic
So,
of this
let me
agenda.
point of order. So you can attack me and I can't even defend myself?
There is no
That's
attacks
what,
going on
yes,
here.
it
This
was.
is an attack.
No, there was
Yes,
an
it
attack
was.
on the board for not following procedure. I am not going to discuss it. If we need to take a recess while we calm down, I am happy to do
I am
that again.
calm.
All right, good. Then let's move
I
on.
spoke last night because I wasn't allowed a discussion at any other opportunity.
Excuse me.
That's the end of what I have to say. And that's my defense from your attack. Now, if you go into non-public, this was my other point, if you don't interrupt on this too, you cannot take a vote because votes have to be made public. So now you've got minutes where some of it's going to be sealed, some of it's not going to be sealed. It gets complicated. The other thing is if you're having an interview and all of a sudden you have to stop them and say, excuse me, we have to take a vote to see if we can continue. There ought to be exceptions for cases that don't normally happen, but if they do, so we're not rude in front of our guests, that we're trying to interview and impress that this is a great district to come to. So that's all. I mean, there's no agenda in an interview. So if you could say, these things which are non-controversial, that we wouldn't chop them up into pieces, you're not going to have a vote and say, well, you didn't make the vote, sorry, you're going home. So it's kind of understood that if you're in the middle of an interview, you'll go to the end. So it's be reasonable to exempt them.
Thank you for your comments. Mrs. Fitzpatrick, are you aware of any times that those certain types of things have happened where HR or other committees have gone significantly over time?
No, generally it is the full board meetings that tend to run extraordinarily long. I do understand what is being said about going into non-public, but I believe that there is a mechanism here for when you come out of non-public to vote to extend the meeting. I also think that it's possible for a motion to be made that going into non-public, that they, as you often do, put the policy aside or the procedure aside in order to say, yes, we will take a vote in non-public. I think that there's mechanisms in place to do that.
Thank you. If
We
Mr.
could call
Moser,
the question.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Moser, how do you vote on your motion to accept the policy BDE as discussed with the changes, with the exception for the budget committee?
Could you read it again?
Certainly.
Before we vote, please?
I accept it.
Okay. I will read it one more time. It says committee meetings shall run no longer than 90 minutes in length, with the exception of the budget committee. The budget committee shall run no longer than 3 hours in length. 5 minutes prior to the conclusion of the meeting, committee members may make the determination to lengthen the meeting by 30-minute increments with a majority vote to conclude a specific topic being discussed.
Yes, as amended.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman.
So just for that amendment, you're asking for my vote? No.
Now I'm asking for the
The amendment.
So
Mr. Moser's amendment.
No, Mr. Moser's motion was to adopt the policy with
Oh,
this
as
language.
amended. No.
As amended. All right. I vote yes.
Motion carries 2-1.
So we will send this on to the main board.
Can I ask that we get an opinion from council on what the procedure is when we're going into non-public and our time expires in the middle of that, so that we know if this goes through, how to handle those meetings, because I don't know how to handle those meetings.
I think that's reasonable.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is policy JICI, weapons on school property. Now, I don't see anything in red here. So
I believe that the reason that this was brought forward is because due to recent events, the state recommended that school boards review their policy. So it could be reviewed, be considered fine, and then just move forward to the whole board for, you could say revision, but it's more that you're reviewing it because it's been recommended to do that.
Mr. Kaufman.
Oftentimes when the state makes a recommendation like that, they issue, what is it, a technical advisory bulletin? So was there an advisory issued with that recommendation?
Yes, and I don't have it with me, so if you
So
wanna, table this, that's fine. I don't have it here.
If I may continue. So in the past, when these advisories came through, we were always, Mr. Frederickson was very good about providing that documentation to us, and you could see the advisory found its way into the update of the policy.
Would you like to make a motion to table it until we have that?
As Ms. Hohense would like to speak first.
On March 1st, Attorney Bolton contacted the board at large and said the board's policy, JICI, is prohibiting firearms on school property and at school events is probably unenforceable against anyone with a license to carry concealed as it violates federal and state law. This is similar to the spending cap provisions, which is also unenforceable. And then there was a thread there.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay, so that's when it was brought up.
I don't know if that was included in those things.
Okay, it was for the board at large.
But I think the basis here should be the technical advisory from the state, because they will have done the research for the state law, federal law, consideration of the carry permits allowed in New Hampshire.
I think it's under 18 U.S. Code 922 unlawful acts. There's a citation.
Yes.
Q2B, which specifically, I've got the text of that, so that might be helpful. I don't know that we have to put the text of it, but we have the citation. Maybe we need to make it more specific, or maybe we need something to say notwithstanding the exceptions to this policy pursuant to this section, and put that in there. But this is a question, since Attorney Bolton got involved in it, if he would help us rewrite it, I think that would be the clearest way to go forward. Because I don't know that the commissioner sent out a technical advisory, and I think our attorney's on top of it.
Mr. Guarino?
Patrick just said.
Yeah, I don't see any need to change it because last year the governor signed a law that says if you have a gun, you don't need a license in New Hampshire. So concealed or open carry, you don't need a license. And so this our policy is consistent with federal law, which says that unlicensed firearms are not allowed on school campus. So we're consistent with the federal law, and the state law says doesn't require a license. So basically, I don't see any need for change.
Well, I just want to ask Mr. Moser, do you have a comment?
I see no need to make any changes.
Mr. Kaufman?
So I'd just like to point out the second sentence says this policy applies to students and members of the public alike. It doesn't reference staff or teachers. So if I read this policy, a staff member is not any staff member. Maybe we need to say employee, but this does not refer to our employees at all, actually, if you think about it, if you look at it. And I think, although this is, and I forget what the J topic is.
JICI.
No, the first letter J, what section it's in, that's students, isn't it? I think J is students.
Yes, I believe so.
So, do we have a similar policy for staff?
So I might suggest that we table this until we have a copy of the information from the state and until we can have Mr. Bolton's advice
Can I just
and
make
bring it back next month.
one comment before we do that? There's a reference in here in terms of what a weapon is, and then it goes on a very long list of specific things. And then it refers to a particular RSA where those things are defined. If I learned one thing from Mr. Moser over my 2 years going to policy meetings, is that it's always best perhaps not to quote the RSAs in our policies, because then we have to change our policies when the RSAs change, that we rather refer to them as an inclusionary kind of thing. So because I've noticed this, and I can think of one or two things that aren't on this list. So it's possible when the RSA was updated that those things are here. And we do better to refer to their list than create one that has exclusions.
Okay.
So I learned something from you, Mr. Moser, just wanted you to know.
So in the interest of being efficient with our time, I think we should go ahead and move forward as opposed to continuing to discuss this, only to bring it back and discuss it again.
May I make one comment?
Sure, Mrs. Thomas.
It says the weapons included but not limited to. In the sense of students following this, they need a long list. They need to have a clue to what weapons they should put in their backpacks and which ones they should leave at home. So I think this is helpful. And the other thing is the first paragraph, it says members of the public who violate this policy will be reported to the local law enforcement authorities. So you're threatening the public with police action
No.
if, well, that's what it says, members who
No,
violate
I was
this.
saying, Mr. Gordon, I see him. Sorry, I didn't want me to interrupt you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I got confused. But, so this is saying adults can't carry with, whether they're concealed with a license, universal or not. So this is the part that's wrong, it's factually wrong. You need an exception here. And perhaps Attorney Bolton can do it, but you can't leave this as is, as Mr. Guarino says, because you're telling adults that they can't when certain ones can. And it's not with universal carry, they have to have that permit or license that you get from your local police.
I would very much like to have some legal advice from Attorney Bolton before we get into that, because I think we have the right to report anything we find be a safety concern to the police at any time, and then the police can do their job and determine whether or not it is also a crime. So I certainly would not want to wade into those waters without getting that advice. So if I could have a motion to table it, I would really appreciate it.
A motion to table the discussion on JICI weapons on school property pending legal review. Is that okay?
I think so.
You've got it covered.
Is that a second, Mr. Moser?
Yes, second.
And so let's call the motion. Mr. Moser?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. The next item I have on my agenda is proposed policy GBL, which is a separation from employment policy.
And this has been before the full board before. You can see that proposed is crossed off. I do want to let folks know that the reason it says GBL and then it has basically a division sign there is because when researching this, Tara could not find any other policy manual that has this specific policy manual. And so that's why there's that strange character at the end, because it's unique to our district.
Okay.
And the only change from the proposed policy that already went before the full board is the credit card piece.
Yes, Mr. Kaufman.
I spoke with Ms. O'Gara about this last night, and it was her recommendation that the references that are in the upper right-hand corner really find their way down toward the bottom of the document where we typically have related references or whatever. So I would ask that the references to EHAA and ECAR, along with their names of policy, be included at the bottom of this policy.
Oh, yes, I see. I see what you mean.
Very good.
Is that a motion?
So moved. Or someone else has to.
To amend GBL?
Yes.
To include the references at the bottom of the page, along with the date and the numbers.
And the description of the policy name. I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Do you have it?
Motion to amend GBL to include the references to the bottom of the page and description of policies. And include description of policies.
Or the policy name.
Description of policy name.
Well, just include the policy name.
So, to include the policy name, the date, and the numbers.
Policy
What's
name.
the numbers? I don't know. And the policy name and the date.
I think he's referring to the date.
And the date. Okay. So on the motion to amend, so the motion is to move the references to the bottom of the page, add the policy names and the date.
Correct.
Mr. Moser, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And so that moves it around. Now, do we have a motion to accept the policy and move it to the full board?
So moved.
Okay. Can I second? I'm seconding it. Any discussion further? Okay, Mr. Moser, on the motion to accept this policy and move it to the full board.
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Great. One minute. Thank you. And so the last item I have on the agenda for this evening is policy, formerly policy 1132, which is now being labeled BEDG regarding the distribution of minutes.
And the reason we're proposing this is because the minutes are no longer sent to the news media in the packet. The minutes are posted on the district website.
Okay. Mr. Colton.
So how was that change made? It seems to me, if the policy says it's going to be sent out, to not do that is a violation of policy. So who made that decision to stop it? It should have come to the board, to this committee, and say, yes, it's an obsolete thing,
Yeah.
we should stop it. So to arbitrarily stop it without, you're violating policy doing that.
Right, and it wasn't me. This is prior to my coming. I don't know who is responsible for that, but I do know that they're now posted on the website. This, I have no idea when the change was made. None.
Yes, finish,
Okay,
please.
so I think there are several changes that I believe that are necessary. So for everybody at home, it reads, the minutes of the school board meetings and executive meetings shall be posted on the district website prior to the next scheduled meeting of the board. It says school board meetings and executive meetings. We don't have executive meetings. We have school board meetings, we have committee meetings, we have ad hoc committees that may meet. I mean, those kinds of things. We don't have executive, we just, right, we looked at our standing committees earlier tonight, so we don't have an executive committee. But I think this needs to be very clear that every school board meeting, be it if it's committee, ad hoc, or whatever, and of course that would include the strategic plan committee when that gets kicked in. That's why I mentioned the ad hoc or special committee of the board. We need to be completely inclusive. That's the first thing.
So do you have a language that you'd like to see, the minutes of the school board meeting and all other board meetings or all other board committee? And I'm not sure what language would be best instead of executive meetings. Because as I read it as executive meetings covering the non-regular school board meetings. But perhaps
That's not clear enough.
we need a more specific.
So why don't you have the minutes of the school board meetings, committee meetings, and ad hoc committee meetings?
Or special meetings, because sometimes.
Well, that would be part of the board meetings. Special
Okay,
or
because
not,
it's committee of the whole.
So school board meetings, committee
meetings
meetings.
and ad hoc committee meetings.
You know, let me inject something here.
Thank you, Mr. Moser.
Yeah, we changed the executive meetings to standing committees. So we did away with the term executive meeting because we execute the thing in the standing committees and the presentation to the full board. So we can remove that part without any consequence. There's no such thing anymore as executive meetings. That goes back to some of the processes in the House of Representatives, where they have special meetings which are called executive meetings, which are closed only among the members of that committee.
Do we have a preference between changing the word executive simply to standing committee meetings or listing it out committee meetings and ad hoc meetings?
I would change it that school board meetings that all school board meetings,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just we need the word all.
because that's what we're doing. We're putting, the standing committees and the school board meetings, all the meetings that we have are, unless we do otherwise, they're all public.
Can I ask Mr. Moser a question? So, Mr. Moser, so something like the Strategic Planning Committee, it's a committee created by the board. So it's clear the intent is that that would fall under these same rules. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So perhaps then maybe just.
We would be looking for public input.
So in that instance, I kind of like Mr. Moser's suggestion where the minutes of all school board meetings shall be posted on the website. Now, if I may continue, right after that inclusion shall be posted on the Nashua District website, two things I believe should be included here. One is we need to have those things probably 5 days prior to the next regularly scheduled board meeting of the school board. That's necessitated by the fact that we have to, as chairs, as members of the committees, we need to look at, so these things would normally come to the consent agenda. So the part of the board packet says we receive things 3 days before.
I hear what you're saying.
So we need to, if this is our only access to that information, we need it at least 3 days. 5 days is even better. But it needs to be very clear here that these have to be posted on the website in a period of time prior to the scheduled board meeting. And the other thing I would say is that the announcement, there should be an announcement of the availability of these documents sent to the board and including a link to that document.
Mr. Corwin.
Before you make changes to this, I think you have some other policies that said, talk about minutes and how long it takes the minutes to be posted. Is that correct?
I don't have my policy
It
manual.
is-
I'm sorry.
And frankly, no, it's not that, it's just that the policy manual is pretty,
It's pretty big.
yeah,
So,
and so I'm working my way through
Yeah.
it, but I would
Right.
be remiss if I said I could quote policy.
right. No, I understand that. And this is probably the reason, included in the packet sent to the news media, this is probably like from 1955 or something, that's probably why it's like that, and we need to catch up with the 21st century and that's what, so basically the school district is doing things, putting it online and stuff like that, but our policies are lagging behind. So I think that's what the situation that's going on here.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, we have policy BEDG, which is
Oh, this is replacing it?
No. Yes. No.
Well, that's what this,
Yes.
that's
So we have
exactly
a,
what we have in front of us.
we
now.
have a problem. So policy BEDG is an existing policy on minutes. And it says the clerk will keep a record of the actions of the board meeting. The minutes will be kept in an official minute book and will include resolutions and motions. The resolution, it just goes on. But copies of the draft meeting of a minute will be sent to the board before the meeting at which they are to be approved. Corrections may be made at that meeting. And it says minutes of all public meetings will be available for public inspection no later than 5 business days after the meeting.
Right, so we already had something like that.
So, and I think that's the relevant part.
There's a difference. 5 days after the event occurs, this is giving them out before a board meeting. Like we have to have our documentations 3 days ahead.
They would already have it out though.
So I hear.
Would you let her speak without
Well,
interruption,
well, she
please?
didn't
Mr.
even get the
Guarino.
floor.
Mr.
She didn't even ask for the floor.
Mr. Guarino, I am
Yes,
capable
I know,
of running
I
a
know.
meeting.
I know you are.
Okay? I don't need
I know you are,
assistance.
but he thinks he's running the meeting.
Mr. Guarino,
I understand that now.
thank you.
Okay.
Mrs. Hohensee, if you could complete your thought.
It was on agendas. There's a meeting, and we put it in the past 2 years, saying it was for different committees that would have a meeting right before the board meeting, And when they transposed the recommendations, the motions, there were some errors. So rather than have errors, they said you need to have the minutes 3 days before the board meeting, or by the time that the agenda goes out. You can't make the agenda based on minutes that don't exist, and that's 3 days before. So that would be consistent with our other policies that you say you have to have the minutes available 5 days after the event, but 3 days before you're going to use them to approve them or whatever you're going to do with them.
I'm uncomfortable with putting in the distribution thing that a timeline where it is. I'm okay with putting a timeline after the meeting. Like, we've had a meeting, you have this many days to get it on the website. I'm uncomfortable with saying it also has to be this many days before the next meeting, because we frequently have a number of our committee meetings the week before our second of the month. I see you, Mr. Kaufman, after I'm done. A second of the month regular board meeting. So if we make in policy that the minutes have to be up 5 days before the next board meeting, well, the next regularly scheduled board meeting is frequently only 3 days after the meeting. So we have some institutional conflicts because of schedules that are already determined. The ones that would be in conflict with this are curriculum. Our policy is never available 5 days before the next meeting because we don't have our meeting 5 days before the next meeting. What else is that week? HR is typically that week. Budget this season, finance and JSBCC all happen that second to last week of the month, and then the Monday we have our board meeting. So I would suggest that we either copy this language where we say it will be on the website 5 days after the meeting, or simply prior. I don't have strong feelings either way, but I would definitely be opposed to saying it has to be up this many days before the meeting, because there might be a systemic conflict there that can't be resolved. So, Mr. Kaufman.
So a couple of things. I think what I understand the intent here is because 1132 was sitting out there and you wanted to roll it into this. So, but based upon the institutional conflict, I love the way you described it, by the way, I would argue that this proposal before the board be integrated into the existing BEDG if it meant just adding something about distribution of minutes. And then we could retire 1132, which I think was ultimately part of what you wanted to accomplish. So I would say the thing is we have to have the minutes posted at least 3 days before the next board meeting.
Right.
Because otherwise they will come off the consent agenda.
Right, and I think that works. I think our policy, it's not a policy, I think our current procedure of...
It's a policy.
Is it a policy to take it
Yes.
off? So our
Yes.
current policy of taking things off of the consent agenda because we haven't had enough time to review them is working.
But we should document it. And again, in the BEDG, I think we should just make it clear that that's what we're doing. So you could possibly add some section of distribution of minutes, largely keeping with this intent, that it needs to be there 3 days prior for inclusion, you can almost say for inclusion in the consent agenda.
We can't, I really feel like we can't say 3 days prior to the next meeting because it very well might be next month's meeting instead of the next calendar meeting. Again, because what about our meeting, for example, is usually on a Tuesday, and there aren't 5 business days between Tuesday and Monday.
Can I say something?
Yes, Mrs. Holland.
First off, you got BEDG twice, so this one, if you pass it, would kill this one.
Right.
So it does have to be
We have an
incorporated.
internal conflict.
We have to come back. But the other thing it says here, in the original, copies of the minutes draft shall be sent to the members of the board. So now you've got draft minutes here where you're going to go online with this one. We ought to just table this and come back and make them both online. And I think one of his Mr. Kaufman's suggestion was maybe the announcement, the idea of, okay, the minutes are available and give a link. The minutes of, like, all the meetings that are going, you only give that out before the full board meeting. It really is irrelevant where the meetings are until we want to approve them, and that's 3 days before when the agendas go out. So we send an announcement like we have this many pieces of correspondence, and give the titles and the dates. Then we could list these are the committee minutes, and a link, because sometimes you can't even find them on the website, so a link would help. But we ought to just table this until we combine them.
I agree. I think that's an excellent plan. I'm also looking at the clock, and we are at our time limit. If we're following that new policy that we keep discussing back and forth.
We haven't approved it.
We haven't approved it, just being aware of it. Would someone like to make a motion to table this while we resolve the letter issue and also the language issue between the two?
Move to table BEDG just move to table BEDG.
I'll second it. Mr. Moser, do you have anything to say on that?
Yes, I think that it's a good idea to table it because we're getting kind of foggy on how to carry this little matter.
And so on the motion to table 1132 proposed BEDG, Mr. Moser?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Call it Mr. Kaufman. Mr. Moser, did you second?
Second.
Mr. Kaufman on the motion to adjourn.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Mr. Moser on the motion to adjourn.
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. Meeting is adjourned at 7:35.